Hi, Susan here. I have been spending the last, couple of days and since about 8 o'clock this morning, just wondering about what it is that I want to express about the murder of George Floyd, the peaceful protests, the violence of the past few days. And there's so much that comes to mind. And I'm going to start today by reading part of a personal essay that I wrote. And I'm going to read the end of it. Sunday, May 10th at 6:50 p.m. I was in New York City. I accessorized with a mask and gloves, took the elevator downstairs, and gathered with other masked people to cheer and celebrate Lenox Hill Hospital frontliners. I noticed a car parked catty-corner on the northwest corner of East 77th Street. There were 2 or 3 Orthodox Jewish men. I'm Jewish. I recognize their garb. Setting up a microphone and amplifier. At exactly 7 p.m., standing atop the hood of the car, one of the men began singing the Star-Spangled Banner, with rousing cheers when the words freedom and brave were sung. Then amidst the honking and cheering, with the police car stopped to the right of the singer, the second song, You Raise Me Up, filled the street with lyrics celebrating the healthcare workers. I was thrilled to be part of this gathering in the safety of my hometown, Manhattan. The cheering and honking was perfect accompaniment to the singing. Every cell of my body was bathed in love and appreciation. Though faces were masked, smiles were in the air. The song ended. The police car turned the corner to cheers and applause. Moments later, a young black man walked past the gathering, saying loud enough to be heard, "Yeah, you're applauding here. This isn't what goes on in my neighborhood." Here's someone standing on the hood of a car giving a concert. The police participate and then just drive away. Come to my neighborhood. It's not like this. There's racism in my neighborhood. Someone would get killed in my neighborhood for singing atop a car hood. Yeah, just keep on applauding and cheering. My eyes followed him as he continued walking toward Park Avenue. I thought about Ahmaud Arbery, murdered while jogging, a modern-day lynching. I was in an affluent neighborhood. I'm white and privileged, just like most of the people living in that neighborhood. The young black man reminded me that the virus of racism and all isms kills. The vaccine for hate is needed. It's love in action. I wonder, what are the actions for me to take? And this is what I've been wondering for a number of weeks. And then, a week ago, George Floyd was murdered. And then there were peaceful gatherings protesting this senseless death. And yes, needless. And yet I question, Was it needless in the bigger scheme of things, in terms of this being the straw that broke the camel's back, that this being the final call that's needed for the United States as a country, for each one of us to look at our internalized racism, to open our eyes to the institutional, systematic racism. I've had a texting conversation with my 19-year-old granddaughter starting late last night, and I wrote to her again this morning. She's in San Francisco. And if you looked at her, you'd think she was Caucasian. But if you know her, you know that her grandmother is African American. I smile just thinking about her grandmother. Whenever I've spent Thanksgivings with her, as soon as I see her, a smile comes to my face. But this isn't a story about May. This isn't a story about my son-in-law. What is love in action? Violence does get attention, but violence is a symptom. It amazes me. We think of our military in one sense as a peacekeeping force. But how do we approach peace? Through an ever larger and larger and larger military budget for weapons. Police are meant to be peacekeepers. And yet that first night of the gathering in Minneapolis, policemen were armed, were ready for trouble. Is that the first step to approach the hurt, the anger, the frustration, the fear of people who have been thought to be less than? So I've asked myself, and it's actually a question that I first woke up to in a really big way in 2006. How has racism been internalized in me? And here's another story. In 2006, I was writing a book called With Forgiveness, and I was responsible for the chapter on forgiving racism. And I was reading about the process in South Africa. The words, I know reconciliation is part of it, and I'm embarrassed that I don't remember the other. Nevertheless, I was walking through McLaren Park. I was living in San Francisco then, on my morning walk, thinking about what I was going to write about this, when I noticed, I don't know, 10 feet ahead of me, a brown-skinned man, a black man. And as I was walking towards him, still, I couldn't see his face, I simply saw his color. I noticed that I had turned the diamond ring on my finger around so he wouldn't be able to see the diamond. And as I walked past him, I was lost in the awareness of how on automatic I did that. I didn't do it when I passed Asians on this walk, because there's a large Asian community in San Francisco. And I realized that these actions that my body took before my mind, before my consciousness became aware of it, was an act of racism. He wasn't screaming, he didn't have a weapon. He was a man out for a morning walk, just as I was. And I realized that that was the story for me to write about. In Forgiving Racism, it wasn't a forgiveness to this man that I had to forgive him for his skin color. I had to forgive myself for how I have contributed to racism through that act, through that unconscious act. And it was a powerful day for me. When I walked back the other way, I passed him again. And I will admit, at that time, it actually makes me sad now that I didn't have the courage to say to him, "Thank you for the lesson you just taught me." Or to simply smile and say good morning. I did look at him and I did smile. And that was all I was capable of doing then. But I know differently now. And I know for racism to truly end, hi Marilyn, that each one of us has to look at how we are racist unconsciously and make a commitment to forgive ourselves and to be a stand for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness for all. And when we notice in our language, and I'm saying this to myself as much as I am to anyone else, and as we have thoughts that someone is less than, and about whether or not we look them in the eye because of the color of their skin, to really take a look at how we are permitting hate and fear to live in us. So in this personal essay, my last line is, "The vaccine for hate is needed. It's love in action. I wonder, what are the actions for me to take?" And so in probably later on this week, when I've thought it out a bit more, I am going to start a book club for me to read some books about the history of racism, which quite honestly, there were not Black study programs when I was in college. So I can learn more and become aware of the roots. And at that time, I'm going to invite you to join me. But for now, if we want peace in our world, then we must take a stand and be mighty expressions of love. So whoever that young man is, on May 9th, as I stood in Manhattan cheering on the frontline healthcare workers, thank you for the deep, deep reminder that my privilege has afforded me an enormous amount of safety, and I'm grateful for that. And I am committed to being a voice for that safety for all. Any comments you have, I'd love, love, love to read. Thank you. Bye-bye for now.